to this episode of the Off Script Podcast. I am your host, Will May.
And I am Ashley, and today we are going to be talking about negotiations in today's market.
Yeah, we're gonna be covering what's changed from last year, what kind of you're experiencing. I would consider you like the Cheryl Miller of negotiations, right? Like you're doing this. Cheryl Miller's a great WNBA player. So
I didn't know who Cheryl.
I should have went with like Sue Bird or somebody that you might know.
I know who that one is.
Documentary watched. Okay, so we're gonna talk everything from skill set, what you're seeing changing, how you're seeing buyers agents write offers, and how just both sellers and buyers are reacting to this market.
Okay.
Let's start with kind of where we're at today. For this episode, we're going to be right in the middle of February. So we're coming into that spring market and you're starting to see a lot more activity right now. What have you seen change from, like quarter 3 of last year, beginning of quarter 4? What have you seen change in the market in terms of negotiations, offers being written, and how like buyers and sellers are approaching this?
Well, from last year to this year, I would say there's a lot more negotiating happening altogether. And it's a much slower process to get a deal together. I think if we look back a year ago, it was hurry up, get it together. You were still seeing some people waiving inspections because a lot of people get their properties pre-inspected these days. You were still seeing, multiple offers in the spring market last year. And I think we will see that again this year. But during that lull of October through December and then kind of up until now, I'm seeing it pick up again. It's just been really slow moving. Days on market has extended, and that's normal. And so setting expectations with sellers on that. I'm seeing more lowball offers than I would have seen in the past, or I'm not seeing an offer at all. So buyers are a lot more hesitant. And so I'm having to guide buyer agents to actually write an offer and get them to the table. So I think there's a lot more effort involved in getting a deal together than there used to be.
Yep.
And a lot more strategy. It's not just like, put the house on the market and you're going to get an offer, because they have way more options since inventory is up. And because they have way more options, they're a lot pickier. Mm-hmm. And if your listing isn't presented well for the price that it's at, it is going to sit. And you're going to welcome those opportunist buyers.
Yeah. Why do you think, like, when you're like, what have you seen to be the biggest change? Is it major headlines? Is it, like rates? Like what have you seen be the biggest cause of buyers being a little bit more hesitant?
Probably just that there was a lot more inventory over the last few months than what we have seen years ago. And so you have that, then you have, headlines, interest rates were in the 6s, which to us isn't anything too bad, but I think buyers are now starting to realize this is the new norm in the high 5s or the low 6s. And, when they were continuously creeping up over the years, then people were in a panic. And so they're going to hold until interest rates lower is kind of the phrase you hear from buyers all the time. But then they never lowered. It's been pretty consistent over the last year. And so I think new buyers that are entering the market now, they don't know any different because they weren't looking 2-3 years ago when we had lower rates. So it is the new norm, but I definitely think there's just been a lot of buyer hesitancy because of headlines and because of a lot more options in inventory. They also have access to all the same information we do. So they're doing their research, they're taking their time, they're being a little bit pickier. They're asking for inspections, they're asking for concessions, and they know that they have the opportunity to be patient and get a deal if they choose to do so. Yeah,
it's funny because we're in this this transition period between seasonal slower market and spring market happening. So if you look at all the numbers forward facing or where the market's going, we're thinking probably a very competitive spring, probably go back to more multiple offers, you would imagine. But at the end of last year, we had a lot. The inventory started to tick up. Days on market went from 15 to 17, 20 to 27 in January for closed properties or single family properties in Omaha. Days on market was 27. So that headline alone or that stat will freak people out. They'll be like, now buyers can ask for anything and everything. But really that's like a backward facing statistic, right? Because those properties that closed in January sold in December. And what we saw at the beginning of January was a lot more activity rush into our market. And that really was just new buyers that were coming in, and we cleared out a lot of that old inventory. So right away in February, days on market's already starting to drop again. And we only have little under 1.5, 1.3 or 1.4 months of inventory in the existing market, which is not very much at all.
Yeah, and we're seeing that now. I think up until probably second week of January, it was really dead, October through December. I had a listing that I know we had it priced right. We even had value there. We had comps to support it, and it was just really, really low activity. And then what was interesting is it's still pending and it's closing in March. We did get it under contract, but all of a sudden over the last 3 weeks, I've had, while it's pending, several sign calls, several buyer agents asking if the deal's secure, multiple people wanting to get into this property now. I mean, probably more interest in it now that it's under contract and in January than we had the entire 3 months.
Crazy.
And so, I mean, that's a good sign coming into spring market. I also heard from several lenders that mortgage application rates are up significantly. So that tells us a lot of new buyers are entering the market. And I am seeing that in listings now that are coming on. My last few under 300 still went first weekend on market. Those two are in Bennington in like the 260 price point. If they're positioned and priced well, right, and presented well. But my others that are in like the 300-400, you're going to see longer days on market, but that's normal.
Yep. I think that was well said. And like with the old inventory starting to clear out, buyers agents are going to have to really educate their clients on what they should be expecting and setting expectations, which we'll talk about here shortly. But setting expectations can be really, really important in a changing market because your buyers are seeing old headlines or seeing stuff that doesn't maybe apply to our local market here. So they need to be prepared for a little bit more competitive spring and getting a little bit more quick with their decision making, because a lot of the buyers we've seen so far in the past 3 to 4 months are very hesitant. So how are you kind of seeing like the old market of what was a year or 2 years ago versus now, right? When you talk about getting a deal together, it was like do anything and everything from the buy side. And now, even with low inventory, we're still seeing a lot more questions being asked, negotiations, verbal offers are being presented, kind of like feeling out the situation quite a bit more. With buyers coming in, like right now, what would be like advice to buyers agents in order to get deals together in this market and still win for their clients?
I mean, probably to set really good expectations with them that yes, I think buyers are coming in the market thinking at first that I can get a deal, right? Because they look at the headlines, but we are in the market every single day. So it shifts week by week almost. And so now within the last few weeks, we're seeing multiple offers again. Several of the agents on our team, Haley just put one in and multiple offers. We're seeing that. And so I think setting those realistic expectations with buyers that yes, if we see something that's really long days on market or maybe isn't presented as well, we have an opportunity to swoop in and get a deal or some concessions or things like that and take our time. But with any market, if you have a well-presented home that's priced right and strategically positioned, you're still going to have to be prepared to probably come in and pay market value for that home and pay at price or potentially get into a bidding war situation still coming into this market is what I'm starting to see just within the last 2 weeks. So setting those expectations, I think Katie is telling a lot of people right now that she can get them buyer concessions. I talk to her regularly. So she is setting the expectation, not that you will get it, but that we're going to try to. And she has been successful in a lot of listings and being able to get that. Now I think we're going to start to see that shift a little bit as we come into March and April. But that's kind of what I'm seeing on my end. I'm still seeing a lot of sellers pre-inspect their properties, but I am starting to see buyers either get second inspections or still ask for things to be negotiated before they're putting an offer when they're pre-inspected, which is a little bit different than what I saw a few years ago, just because they know they can, and there's not as much competition if there's not another offer, so they're starting to ask for more concessions, and they're negotiating more. I mean, and then it's the same thing on the seller side, setting that expectation that it's not as common to get a full price, no concessions to the buyers. You're just not going to see that. So I think it's important both the buyer agents and the listing agents are setting expectations on both sides so that we can get a deal together.
And what you're seeing in the last few weeks, because we're seeing change week by week, and we've just have been, to some extent, fortunate for agents, right? Like for the last 3, 4, 5 years, you're seeing an extreme in the market, which is very low inventory, which means the market does the work for you. It means if you put a house on the market, it's going to sell. If you're a buyer agent, you're going to have to pay what you need to pay, communicate. And in an extreme market, relationships matter way more than skill does, because the market's going to do the work for you, and your relationships with other agents and your relationships with your people are going to be what wins deals. But in a skill-based market, it's going to be about strategy and putting together a good offer and finding terms that make sense for both sides and finding compromise, right?
Yeah, and leaving the emotions out of it, because I think sellers are obviously the more emotional ones now, because they're the ones that will get offended by a lowball offer or not getting a full price offer. So it's a lot more managing emotions with sellers and expectations than it was a few years ago. And if you don't have the skill set to keep yourself calm and emotional in a negotiation, if you're negotiating out of fear or needing a commission, and if that's what's driving your decision making, then I think you're going to have a really hard time keeping a deal together. You have to be okay losing something and stay level-headed and non-emotional about it in the negotiation to help your sellers make a good decision, and not make decisions out of fear, as I know a lot of us do, especially early on in our careers, because you're trying to get to the closing table and get a commission, but we need to do what's right for our people. And if you really can pull yourself out of it and be non-emotional, they're going to feel that too. Important. And you're much likely to get a deal together if you can stay level-headed throughout the negotiation. Yeah.
As a negotiation goes on, the longer it goes, the more emotion and ego can be involved. So that's where really, really great agents are able to see that, understand what the moment looks like, stay calm, like you said. How are you
understand your position, really, like not get caught in the details of the offer sometimes, like look at the bigger picture.
Yeah, you'll see a deal not come together over price, and then you'll see the next deal have a better price or a better solution for a client, but they get into this longer negotiation, and then something small comes up and ego becomes involved, right? So how are you kind of managing those situations where emotions are high, or somebody might be offended, or ego just becomes involved in it, which is like easiest way to say it, like refrigerator needs to stay and a deal falls apart over something as small as that, or what we see as small in the moment, it doesn't seem that way. How are you managing that with your clients?
Well, I usually stop talking about the detail and pull them out of the details and try and have them look at it at a bird's eye, like higher perspective level. And it's not often that people are really, nobody's fighting over a refrigerator. Nobody loses a $400,000 house over a refrigerator. You're losing that because of ego at that point. Yeah. It's not about the refrigerator. And so I think it's just being able to calmly pull them out of the actual situation and put them in a future state of whatever that is, right? Yeah. Bring them back to their whole purpose of why they're selling. Look, is it worth losing a deal over a refrigerator, and we're under contract on your next home that closes? Is it worth you losing that next home that you really love, have to start this whole process over, go back to market, and who knows if you'll end up with an offer as good or better as that? Is that worth risking over a $1,200 refrigerator? And then put them in a position to actually have that future state of pain, or think through that realistic scenario, pull them out of today and put them in the future, and then have them make that decision from there. And I have found that more times than not, when I'm able to do that with people and have them really look 2, 3, 4 weeks ahead, they're able to kind of compose themselves and be like, you know what, look, like this is silly. This isn't worth blowing a deal up, because most people are rational if you can speak to them in a rational way.
Yeah. Yeah, and by the time you get to that point, it's your job as an agent to see the bigger picture. Why did we get into this process in the beginning? Why did we start the process of moving and buying and selling, and not let that little moment overtake the entire situation, the whole negotiation? Sometimes the win is getting to the closing table. Yep. They just can't see it in that moment.
Well, and I think when you get a lowball offer, it's our job to level set those emotions from the beginning and anticipate what our sellers are going to feel. I already know if I get a lowball offer, what my seller's feeling. They're going to be mad. They're going to be angry. They're going to be upset. And so get ahead of that. Don't just present the offer to someone and say, call me and tell me how you want to respond, right? Send an email or whatever you have to do. Like, look, it's not uncommon for us to get a lowball offer if we've been sitting on the market for 35 days and no offers. It's just a starting point. Like, set that expectations and get them in a headspace to non-emotionally give a response by going through what all the key indicators are and then helping guide them to make a good decision. And I think that's kind of what I didn't have to do years ago. It was just you could give someone an offer and like, let's get on a call and respond, right? Because it was full price, very clean. Like there's nothing to negotiate.
Yeah.
And now we're having to actually use our expertise, which is what's the fun part about this, and your skill set, and truly look at it and understand what your position is as a seller and like who actually has the leverage in the negotiation, and then guide them so that everyone feels like they're still getting a win in a way.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does mean that they're going to take under asking, and that is a win for the seller.
Yep.
You know, if you've been on the market for 4 months, this is an extreme situation. You're not going to advise your seller to take a $40,000 under asking offer probably, but you're also not going to advise them to counter at full price asking when there's no competition and it's been on the market for 4 months. So like you have to know what leverage you have as the agent so that you can maximize their equity and protect what they have.
Yeah. And this is with the understanding or the assumption that we have a very good idea of what the home's worth, right? Like if you're listing high, you can expect to get lower ball offers. So when we're talking about this, we're not saying like any deal is a good deal, but oftentimes like when you're already under contract and you're close to getting the deal done or closed, sometimes that's when we have to make the harder decisions. Now, when we don't have a deal put together and there's a low ball offer, that's a totally different situation, right? Where the win in that situation is to keep the negotiation alive.
Yes.
Right? Because as a listing agent, then you have leverage, you can continue working. And like how have you approached that with your sellers of like just getting a response? Even if
so instead of them, you're saying if they got a low ball offer, if they're like, I'm not even responding, getting them to respond.
Yeah, like that,
Okay.
being offended or whatever that might look like.
I think just talking them through it and trying to put them in the buyer's shoes. I think the best way to negotiate on either end is to, you still want your client to know that you're a team with them, but it's also important to help them understand the perspective of the other party so that they can make a good decision. And so I usually would say, like, look, they're probably an opportunist buyer coming in. We've been sitting on market. They know there's no direct competition. They're testing us to see how much we will come down and what they can get. And so if I really, and this is where your expertise comes in as a listing agent, you have to know the value of your home, right? If you have no idea what the value of your home is, and you don't really know, then it's going to be hard to negotiate for your seller. But if you know your value's there and you can justify it and you have that, then you're in a position to, counter more aggressively. Maybe only come down $5,000 if you're 40 off, if you know your value's there. And if the buyer is not going to come anywhere close to that, you weren't going to take that deal to begin with. So you're really just seeing how much they're going to come up and keep the deal alive, at least respond. I'm actually in that situation right now where a seller doesn't want to respond, but we're going to. Because we did get a lowball offer, and I spoke to the agent. He said, look, it's a non-emotional situation. My people are investors. Numbers are numbers. Give us a counter. And so okay, he's not emotional. I'm not emotional. Like, let's at least have a counter offer going. Had we not, we don't know what's going to happen with this, but if we don't respond at all, nothing's going to come together. So I don't really know his position until I give them a counter offer and we go from there.
Yeah. And oftentimes once one person wants something, more people do, right?
Yes.
So you'll have showings and you have different things like that. And having more information as the listing agent or the buyer's agent, whatever it is, only helps your situation. So like when you're having showings come and you have an offer negotiation going, you can leverage that hopefully to get more interest and get more demand for that.
Yeah. Use time on your side if you have a lower offer as an agent. Ask for longer expirations, which I do anyways, asking for 24 hours expirations if you need it. And then, if you are in a position where you have a really low offer, I think it was Ben Smale who actually said this, and I really liked the line. Like, it makes more sense if your seller's in a position where they're considering coming down that much or meeting them in the middle or what, it makes more sense to tell the entire world you're willing to come down $5,000-$10,000 and see if you get more interest than to try and come down 20, 30 in like a negotiation with someone else. If you already know you're willing to come down to that, you might as well take a price reduction and get more activity and see if you get a better offer at that point.
Yeah.
And so you can definitely put your counter in, but you could do a price reduction at the same time and see if you get offers. There's so many different tactics that you can do to buy yourself time and then give them 48 hours to respond, get some more showings going. There's so many different strategies, I suppose, that you could take to help your seller get a little bit better deal.
Yeah. And truly understanding the other side's position, right? If you've been on the market for a long time and you get a lower ball offer, like you can't be upset about that. That's just, what would you do if you were advising them and your clients wanted to write an offer that was low, right? Like you're going to listen to them and you're going to say, hey, they don't have anything. They may not say yes to this, but we can at least write something, and it gives you guys the opportunity to go back and forth. So I think that's really important, is like to understand the other other side's point of view and what they're looking at, because that's going to help you find compromise.
100%. I think getting on the phone with the buyer agents are critical now, especially if you don't have a straightforward offer, so that you two or us two can kind of talk through solutions together of how we think we can satisfy both parties and get a win for everybody. Because that's the ultimate goal, right? Everyone wants to get to the closing table. The buyers wrote an offer for a reason.
Yep.
And the sellers countered for a reason. So they're willing to at least work on a deal. So I think getting that agent on the phone has helped so much in this market, because they are kind of messy negotiations, and it comes off differently when you just send a counter over in writing with no explanation than if you get on the phone and for 10 minutes explain, here's why we countered this way, here's my seller's concerns, their position, this is why they want to close, or they'll come down on price, but they need a quicker close because of mortgage payments. Like, if you can explain and articulate that, and I guess to some degree you are bringing emotion into it in that way in the negotiation, so that the buyers can understand your seller's perspective and vice versa. But I think it's all in the delivery and the messaging and how you do it, so that you don't create an us versus them mentality in the negotiation. I think a lot of agents actually kill the deals more than the buyers and sellers do, by coming together and trying to like win for their clients. Yeah. And I think agents can be the biggest deal killers, more so than the buyers and sellers sometimes.
Yep. Yeah, because at the end of the day, it should be facilitating a win-win, a compromise.
Yeah.
That both sides can reach.
Mm-hmm.
Lost my train of thought. With what you're kind of seeing when you're getting an offer, what are outside of price, right? That's what we all look at, price first. What are the other key terms that you're kind of making sure you're aware of for your sellers?
If there's a home sale contingency, so closing timelines and how that aligns with our situation, if we're having to buy another house and those type of things, inspections, seller concessions, we're starting to see a lot more of that being asked to be paid for by them. So it's the whole offer, not just the price.
Yep.
I had an offer last week that my seller initially was very offended by, and I knew from a non-emotional standpoint it was a great offer, because I knew that we had the house priced a little too high, and my seller even knew that. I even told her, I think we're going a little bit high on the market. So with me knowing that, and knowing we're probably going to have appraisal value issues, and them coming in 10, 15,000 below asking, that sounds really scary, but that was really a great offer, because where they came in at was where I feel like we had our max appraisal at. And because they came in low on price, they didn't ask for inspections, any repairs, anything else. Very quick offer, close in 2 weeks. So like, some agents may look at that and be like, wow, that's a 10,000 or 15,000 below offer. That's an awful offer. Like, that's your initial reaction. Yep. But when you can really look at the full terms, and I know my seller's highly motivated, wants to close quick, doesn't want to deal with home sale contingencies, it checked every other box she had. And when I was able to explain to her, we're likely going to have an appraisal issue anyways, you really probably have a full price offer here. Yep. Like, when you can be non-emotional and explain, this is likely going to happen and you're going to have to come down 15 grand anyways, then we were able to get a deal together. And explain to her, if you get another offer tomorrow, that's 5,000-10,000 more, but it has a home sale contingency and we close in 4 months and inspections and all of these other nuances. Are you going to want to deal with that, or do you want this done? So sometimes it's more about timing and just getting things done and not being a messy for some sellers if they're emotionally stressed than it is price. Yep. And so she was able to accept that at a price that she actually felt happy about, but her initial reaction was not once we talked through that. Yeah.
And a lot of your sellers, or even the buyers coming, like you said, contingencies, right? Mm-hmm. A lot of knowing your seller's position, that's really important too. They may be moving up in space or down or whatever it might be, and be under contract, and being aware of that is really important, because they may lose their property if they can't put something together, or their potential property. Mm-hmm. Yep. So I think that's really important too. But you talked a little bit about being a team, right? Mm-hmm. And there's like two team dynamics, because you're teammates with your client, right? Mm-hmm. And explaining that and understanding that. If you ever get to where it's you versus them, you know that you're communicating in a way that they feel like you're trying to pull one over on them. Mm-hmm. So setting expectations is really big. Reminding them that I'm here to help you, and we're approaching the market together. Mm-hmm. And then you also have the team dynamic with the other agent. And I think like two agents that are problem solving of how can we bring a deal together is way, way more advantageous than somebody saying like, how am I going to get a win out of this? Yeah. For my sellers or buyers.
Yeah, I agree. What was the first question you asked? Sorry. I lost my train of thought as you were talking.
I don't know if there was a question there.
Okay.
I was just talking about the team dynamics.
Oh, the team dynamic.
Yep,
that was what I was going to say.
Clients and
yeah, so I agree. I think if you have a seller, I know I'm speaking so much from the seller position because that's who I help, but same thing with the buyer, right? If you have your client turning on you, it's probably the wording and the messaging that you're using, or you're not articulate and explaining it in a way that's making them feel like you're on their side. If you're just coming to them, the buyer wants this or the seller wants this, and can you see it from their perspective? Yes, that's fine to do that, but you also have to explain the benefits to the seller too. And I think sometimes agents are just like, well, this is why they're offering this way, and they're trying to force their party to see the other side's perspective instead of like really guide them on the repercussions if they don't go with this too.
Yep.
And so for me, I tend to use like us a lot when I'm talking, and I speak in data terms. I think that's the best way to keep them from turning against you is like, look, this is what the market's telling us. This is what the data's telling us. We've been on market for 32 days and 19 showings and no offers. Here's what this is telling me from my experience, based on my experience. Like, I'm very focused on the data and the numbers and the activity and using that to interpret and tell them a story of what I'm seeing based on my experience. And that usually disarms them because, again, if you can speak logic to a logical person, then it helps them remove that emotion and not get angry and upset with you, because a logical person is going to say, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. If my house has been on the market for 4 months and we've had 100 showings and no offers, that probably tells us that we need to reposition or make an adjustment. And if somebody is not logical and it's just they're not even reasonable, usually I'm not working with those people to begin with. And at that point, there's really not a lot you can do if you're working with an unreasonable person.
Yeah,
then
and
you
they're
just have
out
to
there
make
too.
a decision for yourself. And those do exist. Yeah. And you have to be able to filter and see that before you start working with people as well.
A lot of times you don't know that just through experience. You have to learn what that looks like. I think you have to learn what that looks like in terms of like what is a reasonable person versus what is not. But what you said was really important. You have to know your numbers. And if you're just listening to headlines and listening to what other agents' opinions of the market are, and you're kind of like bringing that all together as your opinion. Hope you trust those people and hope they know their numbers, because it's really important to understand like what's been happening over the last 2 to 3 weeks. And I'm seeing it really clearly in our market updates, like the drastic change we're seeing over the past, like from a two weeks at a time. And so you got to be able to see what's coming in the market in order to help your buyers and sellers find wins. And right now, if you're a buyer and we don't know for certain, we look at past numbers and say, yes, we're going to have more inventory coming to the market because it's spring. But if you've been in the market for the last 3 months, you felt how many people entered the market in January and how competitive it looks to be or it's going to be. So being quick and making good decisions right now is going to avoid a lot of competing later.
Yeah. And I think if you're not doing a lot of deals yourself and you're not in it every day, then lean on your team or other people at your brokerage that are producing and in it every single day and like what they're actually experiencing, not necessarily what you're seeing in the headlines, because that's not always the most accurate. And it shifts so often. I mean, even within a week, you can start to see a huge difference. And wow, we had 15 people through the open house and last weekend it was dead. Like, that's how quickly the market and the activity can shift.
Yeah, very, very quick. Right? Like, yes, national headlines can hit people's emotions and make them act, but like you've got to be really granular. You might have to pull numbers in the neighborhood. You might have to pull, within a mile. You have to really like do your work in order to understand what's happening. If you have a listing sitting or if there's no inventory, you might have to go search for that, right? Like, understand where the market's heading and get your clients prepared for it. Don't make decisions that were off of numbers 30, 45 days ago, because it's completely changing by the week.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. I think if you can understand how to interpret the numbers and the data, that's going to set you up for success, because you'll be able to speak to that at the listing table or at the buyer consult and what it means for them. And then if you're setting that expectation, you'll say, okay, when we're on the market, here's what's likely going to happen. And if this happens, here's what we're going to do. So you set that expectation. And then when you're in it, hey, this is what's happening. Remember, we talked about this. Here's the data I'm seeing. Remember, we said we should reposition if this is what we see. Well, this is what's happening. And so those conversations become so much easier if you're okay with losing the listing and having the hard conversations at the listing table and telling them not necessarily what they want to hear, but what they need to hear, and getting ahead of that and explaining that to them.
All these hard situations, like they should just become part of your buyer or listing consult of like, we ran into this may happen, let's be aware of it.
Yeah, I think the power of storytelling can really help build that rapport with somebody too. If you have a difficult seller I had this the other day, a FSBO, and like, I'm going to just price it super, super high, so I'm negotiating. I mean, you get these extreme stories, and then instead of trying to convince somebody not to do something, because that never works in my experience, just use the power of storytelling. And, can I share a story that happened with a client and like hear what the outcome was? This would be my concern for you. It's so much more disarming to somebody, and they don't get as defensive, and because you're not hitting their ego as much. You're coming from a place of compassion and telling them like, I don't want this to happen to you, and can I share this is what happened with another seller who did this, or 2-3 other examples. So I use storytelling a lot to get the outcome that I'm hoping to get without like really rubbing against their ego, if you will.
Yeah. No, I think that's really important, right? And what you're saying is, I've seen this before because you're in the market every day. So I want to avoid this, or make sure that if this does happen, I was making you aware of it.
Yep.
And they'll see that, like that you're working for their best interest.
Yeah. And I have found I was really afraid to have those conversations before at the listing table, because I was afraid like they're not going to work with me, or I'm telling them what they don't want to hear, a price that they don't want to hear. But getting ahead of that, and literally this line, I use it all the time, is, I'd rather let you down at the listing table than let you down later. So I'm going to tell you the truth, and like, here's what I'm seeing. And I have not lost a listing because of that. People appreciate candidness and honesty. And so if anything, I found it actually really helps, because now I feel like that trust with me is so much stronger, because I'm not just buying their listing and telling them what they want to hear. And I'm telling them that directly. Like, if I don't get the listing because I'm not telling you the price, I'm okay with that, but here's what I think, and I'll like go through that scenario with them. Yeah.
And that same honesty can be used with other agents when negotiating and countering offers and doing different things like that. Okay, this is where we're at. This is where, let's try to make something work.
Yep.
All right, we're wrapping up. Putting you on the spot here. 3 pieces of advice for anybody going into this market when it comes to negotiating and getting deals put together and keeping them together.
Okay. I would say get creative and ask for help if you're not really sure how to respond. Like, have a mentor or somebody, because this is a skilled market. So if you don't feel like you're skilled and know how to handle it, have a mentor and somebody who can help you. I would say set very clear expectations with buyers and sellers before even beginning, because that's going to save you hours and hours of time and emotional stress.
Yep.
And third, I would say be patient and buy yourself time in negotiations to get the result that you're hoping to get.
Use time as a tool.
Use time as a tool.
I love it. Cool. Anything else you got here?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, hopefully this was extremely valuable. We very much focus on skill sets and on putting our agents in the right environments and understanding what that environment is right now. So if it's something you need, or you just need more information in terms of like what the market's doing and how to succeed in this market, always reach out to us. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of Off Script.
See you next week.